Good afternoon and welcome to the National University Speaker Series. My name is Nancy Rowland Heinrich and I serve as the Executive Vice President of Communications and Community Engagement for National University. I am also proud to be the founder and host of our National University Speaker Series. Today we welcome students, alumni, staff, faculty, and many community members who are joining us for the webinar. At National University, we are excited to welcome the new academic year. Today, NU proudly serves more than 40,000 students, and collectively, we have more than 230,000 alumni working in very diverse fields. We certainly appreciate your interest in attending the speaker series as we bring topics that are helpful to all of you, regardless of what area you work in. Today's topic should be of great interest to many of you as we look at mastering problem solving for workplace happiness. And we have the pleasure of gaining rich insights from a very experienced and savvy business leader, Dr. Edith Dorsey. Dr. Dorsey is the CEO and founder of EDD Consulting and currently serves as the VP of Claims for Delta Dental. I am pleased to share that she will be our first alum from NCU to present at the NU Speaker Series, so congratulations. She has held several senior leadership roles in many healthcare and insurance-related organizations such as Kaiser Permanente, UCare, United Health Group, and Liberty Mutual. She has been a powerhouse in driving organizational enhancement and improvements in major national companies. Her span of expertise includes change management, transformation, operations, and leadership development. So today, Dr. Dorsey will help all of us understand why problem solving is such an important factor and an area to master. But before we start, I would like to share with you that we will have a moderated Q&A following the presentation. So I encourage you to put any questions that you have in the Q&A. And today's moderator is part of the National University leadership team, and we are pleased to have Meg O'Grady, the Senior Vice President for Military and Government Programs, serve as our moderator. So at this time, it is my pleasure to welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Edith Dorsey, as she shares how mastering problem solving can impact our workplace happiness. Dr. Dorsey?
All right, good evening. Thanks, Nancy. Can everyone hear me? I just want to do a quick sound check. Thanks, Nancy, for that great introduction. And good evening, National University students, alumni, faculty, and those joining across the country. After that great upbeat prelude music, everyone in the audience should be happy and ready to dance. I love the lyrics to that song, especially the words that state, "It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break." Well, National University sunshine, and frankly speaking, their competitive advantage over all other universities across the country is their whole human approach. Therefore, during this webinar, I will share a whole human problem-solving methodology that you can use both inside and outside the workplace. If this will let me advance the slide, let's just see what we have here. Okay, that went a little too far. All right. Early in my career, I started as a registered nurse, and I transitioned from a clinical role to a business role leading call centers, claims, and billing and enrollment. Later in my career, I held executive level roles where I solved enterprise problems related to people, processes, and technology. However, over the course of my career, when I intentionally focused on making meaningful connections with people, two key things happened. Unprecedented results were delivered, record results within record time, and my career naturally evolved from bedside to boardroom. Before we learn how to dance, let's establish a basic definition of problem solving. Problem solving is the act of defining the problem, determining the root cause, identifying, prioritizing, and selecting the solution, and implementing the solution. However, problem solving at its core is a fundamental human cognitive process, transcends all generations, demonstrates that you have a range of other competencies such as imagination, creativity, logic, and resilience. And it's absolutely a critical part of your daily life, both as individuals and organizations. Speaking of organizations, according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, NACE, their top skill that employers seek is problem solving. Their 2020 survey indicated that 91% of employers identify problem solving as the top skill. Similarly, their 2023 survey identified over 60% of employers identified problem solving as the top skill. Now that we've identified why problem solving is so important to employers, let's explore why problem solving is important to you personally. As humans, we only have a finite number of years to live. According to Harvard Health Publishing, on average, humans live 76 years or approximately 665,000 hours, a little over that. Of that, approximately 286,000 hours you're sleeping, and the remaining, a little over 379,000 hours, you are awake. Now, let's do some simple math and feel the urgency. Assume for a minute that everyone on this call is 35 years of age. That would mean your total hours remaining to live is a little over 359,000 hours. And of that, a little over 200,000 hours you're awake, and the remaining 154,000 hours you are sleeping. I did the math personally, and I have 105,000 hours remaining, with a little over 59,000 hours awake, and the remaining, or the change in that, 59,000 hours or 45,000 hours sleeping. So what's your awake number, and how are you going to spend the remaining awake hours of your life? Now, of course, no one knows when we're going to die. That's not why I'm here today. I'm here to bring you some sunshine. One of the main reasons why I'm here today is to get all the participants in this audience focused and intentional with having an infinite impact on your life and on the lives of other people around you in the time that you have remaining. Research suggests that decision-making is a part of problem solving, and that the average person will make in a lifetime a little over 776,000 decisions in a lifetime. Therefore, it's reasonable to assume that the average person may, and the key word there is may, solve a minimum of 776,000 problems in a lifetime. So follow the logic. If you teach 2 other people to problem solve, your impact would be 1.5 million problems solved. If the 2 people that you taught to problem solve teach 2 more people to problem solve, that would be 3 million problems solved. Now, keep in mind, the 1.5 million and the 3 million does not include you teaching your family. For those of you on this call who have children, remember, your children are watching you. Your behaviors and actions as parents are teaching them how to problem solve. I've included a picture of my son on the bottom of this slide. His name is Richard Jr. Richard is an outstanding problem solver. I watched him grow from being an ice cream scooper at Brewster's in high school to now traveling internationally to solve problems for Fortune 500 companies. The bottom line is problem solving contribution that you make to others is infinite and it will outlive you. And it's been my experience throughout my career, the more problems that I solved, the happier I became. Allow me to share a little bit more about my journey. When my career first started, I knew how to take a patient's pulse, never thinking that that skill would turn out to be an invaluable asset inside of corporate America. I struggled with bridging clinical theory to practical business application in the workplace regarding people and solving problems. I quickly learned to be an effective problem solver. You will need to take your own pulse, which is emotional intelligence, along with the pulse of others, which is understanding human dynamics and organizational ecosystems. While not taking a physical pulse, problem solvers are really tuned into people, building great relationships, and reading the vital signs of an organization. Here's a sampling of the many problem-solving models I encountered. Starting at 12 noon and working in a clockwise fashion around this slide, you have the 5-step DMAIC model, the 6-step model, the 7-step model, the 8D model, the 9-step model, the A3 approach. And I think this audience gets the point. I was overwhelmed with fact-based models. And in case you didn't recognize that picture in the center of the slide, that's me. I was on information overload. So I'd like to ask this audience a question. Jen, let's bring up the first poll because I'd like to ask this audience any guesses to what's missing with the current problem-solving models. It will be interesting to see what everybody comes up with.
Can we share the results?
Oh, look, you know what? Most of the people in this audience, they get a gold star. 78% of you got it right. Great job. Way to go. All right, I'll move to the next slide. What's missing is the problem-solving models that I was exposed to, like those on the prior slide, were loaded with fact-based information, content, void of taking into consideration the soft skills, the human factors related to problem solving. In addition to being on information overload, I had to figure things out on my own. I had no mentors, a lot of organizational complexity, many personalities, sometimes yielding conflict, long work hours, lots of organizational changes due to internal and external pressures. I questioned my happiness and I was ready to quit and move on. Does that sound like any of you? However, instead of leaving my job, I began to analyze my failures and successes. I kept a journal to express my feelings and my experience. I ended my journal entries with the phrases that you see on this slide that became the chapter title of my book. So I'm going to give you some detail on each one of them, but staying still at a little bit of a high level. Inefficient problem solving, that's where you have too many cooks in the kitchen or solving problems in a vacuum, causing adverse impact and rework to other business areas. Confusion and misconceptions, lots of pontification versus action, or sometimes you'll hear this one referred to everyone admiring the problem versus doing something about it. Trial and error. It certainly allows for experimentation and incremental learning, however, not efficient when you have a time constraint. A lost package. This is when you feel like a lost letter or package because of being bounced around from person to person within the workplace, being given lots of conflicting advice. Being on a merry-go-round. There are two versions of that. The first version is long existing problems in an organization may sometimes require senior executives to take action first before employees at a lower level can take action. Another version is the employees stay on the merry-go-round because they don't recognize they've already been empowered by the senior executives to make a decision. Elephants in the room, that's a common one. Everyone here knows that people who dance around the obvious problem or the elephant versus addressing it head on. Herding cats, it's getting the right people in the room to do problem solving, sometimes a challenge due to calendars. Convenient chaos, this is when messages from senior executives are not always cascaded, are not always translated accurately to frontline employees, impacting their ability to problem solve. Dirty diapers, this is when you're handed a really awful or sometimes referred to a well-fertilized situation or problem to work through. And musical chairs, this is when a team has a great problem traction. However, a new person is introduced and all the problem solving just spirals out of control. Now, these are just my observations. I'm curious. Hey, Jen, let's bring up another poll and see what this audience thinks in terms of what they've been exposed to. Some of the things that they've encountered. Let's have them do that.
And Edith, can you see this poll?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So which of these experiences have you encountered the most?
Yes.
And we've got a lot of people coming through answering. Looks
Great.
like confusion and misconceptions. Yeah. Now there's a lot of them. I'm gonna leave this open for just about 5-10 more seconds.
Great.
Great.
Oh, interesting. Look at that. Confusion and misconceptions. That took the, wow. And then it's followed by inefficient problem solving. All right. Well, thank you for that. We can go ahead and close the poll. The way I want to sum up this slide is, while all of these may appear to be challenges, please embrace them and use this as an opportunity to sharpen your problem solving skills. Address these sort of things head on. My personal career changed when I recognized a patterned relationship between problem solving, overcoming, and my happiness. It went like this. The more problems that I solved, I felt like an overcomer. The happier I became, the more problems I wanted to solve. And this was an ongoing process for me. It was the overcoming part of this process that provided me with the fuel, the focus, and the fortitude to keep on going. I actually wrote this simple equation in my journal. A simple model plus relationships will equal positive outcomes. Positive relationships are mission critical for both business and employee engagement results. The simple model that I unearthed in my journal had a distinct set of steps that I refer to as dance or dancer. The reason I created the dance model is to combine the fact-based part of problem solving with relationship skills. Let's quickly cover the anatomy of each letter. D is define the problem, develop the problem statement, and drive discovery. Straightforward. A has several components, with 3 of the components being the relationship part of it. For example, anchoring accountability. This is where you gain support and awareness of your top level executive when problem solving. Being an ambassador, it means that you're an ambassador for your top level executive, but most important, you must be an ambassador for those who are doing the work. Make sure that those people who are doing the work are the decision makers and that their voices are being heard at the executive levels. Affiliations. This is when you foster authentic relationships and connections at all levels in an organization. Analyze how big is the problem and the potential impact, and then certainly agree on those analytics and facts that you came up with. Moving on to N, you want to note the options to resolve, and then certainly you want to put numbers around that. However, I want to caution, sometimes as executives, that's the only thing we tend to focus on would be the numbers. However, I have a $1 billion example coming up on the next slide that'll challenge that thinking. C is choosing the option to implement and doing broad-based communications. E is executing, enabling other people, keeping your emotions in check, and evaluating the whole way along. And then R is remaining resilient. Problem solving is not easy. You have to be very resilient and reserve the right to refine this process and repeat. All right, these are 2 examples that I wanted to share with you in terms of how the dance methodology was applied. The first is inside of the workplace. I was invited to join an organization based on my ability to problem solve while building relationships. Prior to me joining the organization, the company had spent multi-million dollars on a failed attempt at an enterprise-wide system deployment. The root cause of the prior failure was top-down decisions were made, not engaging the people closest to the work, which were the unionized employees. When I joined the company, I immediately spent the first couple of months building relationships with the union and empowering them to document their requirements and their metrics. In addition, it was the unionized employees who presented their work to the executive suite. It was not Edith Dorsey taking their work and presenting it to the executive suite. It was the frontline employees who were presenting their own work. The senior leaders and the HR department, they were amazed at how quickly contracts were signed with the union agreeing to everything. This project was completed on time, came in under a $1 billion budget with a highly engaged workforce. The next example I want to share with you is outside of the workplace. Years ago, many years ago, my husband and I would go to auctions. The minute we would arrive, we would both split up and we would just go to various parts of the warehouse. Sitting in the remote corner of the warehouse was a wooden statue. Matter of fact, it's the statue that you see on this slide. My husband refers to this as the ugly statue. I refer to this as the unique statue. My husband wanted me to ask Jen to launch a poll with this audience and have you vote on ugly versus unique. I told my husband we don't have time for that, and that the only thing that we are going to agree on regarding the debate regarding the statue is that the words unique and ugly both begin with the letter U. In any event, I was walking around, the auctioneer came up to me and he said, I said to the auctioneer, I'd like to have this go up for bid. And he says, no, this is not going up for bid. My husband walks up, The auctioneer knew my husband by name. They exchanged greetings. And then he told my husband, yes, I will put this up for bid. The auctioneer was very strategic after he recognized that I was married to someone that he knew. He was very strategic. He waited until the very end of the auction. And what he said was this, he threw it up there for bid at $20. And before anyone else could bid, he said in these words, you bought it. And we were able to get this statue for $20. So what's the point of this? Whether you're talking about a $1 billion corporate initiative or a $20 purchase at an auction, relationships matter. Relationships are what's going to drive your outcomes. So what are those human factors I'd like to leave this audience with, or things for you to think about? Building relationships, listen and build trust, emotional intelligence, the ability to assess and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others, self-awareness. It's what I was saying earlier about taking your pulse and taking the pulse on other people. Be situational. One size or one style of leadership does not fit all situations. You have to be a very flexible individual, whether you're in a leadership position or not. Significance versus success. I love this. That's why I'm here tonight. Success focuses on yourself. Significance focuses on adding sustainable value to others. It's about leaving a legacy. The next one is psychological safety. Lack of psychological safety breeds low engagement, groupthink, fear, low performance, and poor results. Mastering crucial conversations. I always tell people when you're having a crucial conversation, always start with the heart first, head second, and hands last. And then last but not least, why we are here today is to talk about how soft skills are underestimated yet vital to problem solving. So how do you get the job or get promoted? Here are some ideas for everybody's consideration. Think less about yourself, about the title, power, money, and think more about what value you can add to the organization and other individuals. If you can solve other people's problems, you will learn, grow, have visibility, and get promoted. Don't expect to have the perfect job. Get paid to have different experiences and how you can evolve those experiences into work that you can enjoy. Be adaptive, agile, intellectually curious, and a lifelong learner. Consider getting yourself a mentor outside the workplace for psychological safety to help you navigate problem solving. If you are already working, find the problems and solve them. And if you're thinking about leaving, hit the pause button for just a second. What you will quickly recognize is that in every job, you will have problems and challenges. Consider keeping your current job and using every challenge as the opportunity to sharpen your problem-solving skills. Job hunters, the way to close the deal is to research your company and show up knowing how to solve the problems that you're interviewing for at that particular organization. On the prior slide, I asked that you consider getting a mentor outside the workplace. Here's why. Most organizations do employee satisfaction surveys. My NCU research demonstrated that if employees were asked to take a survey while they were physically at work, their responses would not be the same if they were taking the survey away from work in a different setting. Hence, the title of my research at NCU was Away from Work Surveys, the Role of a Research Setting in Capturing an Accurate Description of Leadership in Organizations. Given my research, I am launching a second company titled Away from Work. The goal of this company is to ensure that working adults have a safe haven, a place to come to get help on navigating workplace problems without fear of their employers being made aware. My wish for all the participants on this call is to go further, faster in your career while using this model. I want you to dance your way to happiness both inside and outside the workplace. Because of the tremendous impact that North Central University had on my career, I am paying it forward. To get a free copy of my book, please complete the survey that is going to be sent out to everyone tomorrow. And when you complete the survey, indicate your biggest takeaway and how you're going to apply the dance methodology. Also indicate how are you going to multiply what you have learned by teaching others how to dance. Also, if you'd like to speak with me following this presentation, you can feel free to visit my website at edithdorsey.com, and there's a Contact Me tab. Last, but certainly not least, I would be highly remiss if I did not take the opportunity to personally thank the National University team, specifically Nancy, Meg, Heather, Jen, and Patricia, for the tremendous job that they did in bringing this to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Edith. Very interesting, very different approach. And I think that everybody on the call, regardless of what industry they're in, what level they're in, probably has already learned a lot from a very different and unique perspective. And I would imagine you will have a lot of requests for a copy of your book, as well as for some of those 30-minute coaching sessions. But now at this time, I'd like to turn things over to Meg O'Grady, and I know that she has some questions that she'd love to have you address. And I know we have some questions that have been submitted in the Q&A, some have been submitted in the chat, but Meg, go ahead and start asking some of those questions.
Great. And thank you so much, Edith. What a generous, generous offer for our folks who are viewing today. Really, really appreciate it. So there are quite a few questions. And the first one, I really like this one because so many of us work for large organizations and sometimes don't really feel empowered to communicate necessarily. So the first question is, how do you recommend that someone make connections and affiliations across a big organization, especially if you're a new employee or low on the totem pole?
Yes, that's a great question. Can you give me the first name of the person who asked that question?
This one is actually an anonymous question.
Oh, anonymous question, no worries. I always like to address people by name. It's all about that humanizing the people who are asking the questions. Great question. I worked at an organization that was over 300,000 employees, and how I was able to get that visibility is through problem solving. That's one. Two, also working with your direct leader and asking them for larger initiatives that will give you exposure across the organization. And in addition, you want to set up what you call a plan, a career development plan. And part of your career development plan should be to very strategically not only work on broad initiatives, but to also go solve problems in other parts of the organization to give you that visibility.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. The next question is from Dr. Martin M. White. Any recommendations regarding problem solving in a higher upper level management turnover environment? So a high upper level management turnover environment.
Sounds like when you are experiencing turnover at the executive level, that turnover could be intentional or unintentional. And I think that's the first part of doing a root cause analysis on why. It could be a cultural problem or it could be intentional. So it's first understanding, maybe working with their HR partner to understand what's happening there. If it's cultural, then the HR partner can really lean in and help them to try to retain talent at that level. If it's unintentional, then again, HR could probably point them in the direction of specific solutions that they can put in place.
Wonderful. Thank you. The next question is from Keisha Armstrong. What if you're stepping into a problem where you have observed there is distrust among senior leaders who must approve the strategy?
I know Keisha Armstrong. That's a great question, Keisha. What I would say is having those open and collaborative communications, because what I have found in the course of my career, and again, at a 300,000 employee organization, folks would say, you know, Edith, you will not be able to get this strategy approved by. And I always kept an open mind. So one, Keisha, keep an open mind. Two, seek coaching offline, seek coaching from your direct leader there, and be an ambassador. Go set up conversations, have that open dialogue, right? Don't assume, because I think sometimes when people assume that folks are not going to approve their strategy, they're doing more harm to themselves than good. So have that open dialogue. Seek first to understand. How about that?
Great. So there are a couple questions, and I'm going to combine a few of them because they all kind of deal with the same sort of subject, which is, how do you let someone know if you think that the problem is them?
Carefully. Okay, so you want to do that carefully. And here's the approach. There's something called Crucial Conversations. It's a book written by Patterson, and I really recommend that. It's a great book. How I boil down Patterson's methodology is to the heart first, head second, hands third. When you are giving somebody feedback, you want to make sure that they understand your intention, right? You want to really try to connect with them as a human being, humanize the person, right? A lot of empathy, a lot of compassion, get at their heart first. Because if you don't go after the heart first, they're not going to hear you. That's the second H, which is head. They are not going to be able to receive anything. The other thing as well, there's a structure to it where usually if I'm giving feedback to someone, in addition to getting at the heart, I ask permission, see if it's a good time, you know what I mean? Because if it's not a good time, they're not going to receive the message. You don't want to be out in the public. You want to be in a private room. So it's all the niceties. You want to make sure that you take care of all of that. And then you want to make sure that you stay away from, I call them explosive words like you, right? And just say, I've observed, right? Observations, et cetera, but you never want to attack the person. You always want to come from the heart. And I think people will sense your intentions when you immediately get them in a private setting and you're having that two-way open dialogue and exchange. And it's really important for people to understand the why behind it. Right? They have to understand the why. And if you're working in an organization and that why is tied to something much bigger than the person who's giving the feedback and the person who's receiving the feedback, usually you can get great alignment. So try to tie it up to the why for the greater good for both individuals.
Great. Now, Dr. Dorsey, I think you may have answered this question in some way, but I think that the way that this one is worded is really interesting. And so I'm going to pose it to you, not to answer again, but actually just to kind of address the transaction versus relationship. So Lena has submitted a question. What is your recommendation when surrounded by people who don't care for relationships? In fact, very transaction based.
Interesting. So I'm assuming that question is regarding the peers don't care for the relationships. That's what it sounds like.
I think so, yes. I think it's hard to establish relationships because they're just right in that transaction all the time. Let's get this done. Let's go to the next. Let's go to the next.
I see. Yes. When you're working in a very high transactional, like call centers and claims, et cetera, as an individual, so employees who are closest to the work, as well as leaders, you have to make the time to inject fun into the workplace in terms of team building, relational items where you can speak to people outside of work, where you can have various activity, team lunches, team activities, anything that will allow people to connect as human beings outside of that high transaction area would be my recommendation there. And you have to be intentional with making that happen.
Wonderful. So Cynthia has asked, what if the atmosphere is us versus them?
What if the
atmosphere is an us versus them atmosphere?
Yeah, sounds like it's a matrix organization and they have conflicting goals, right? So they're working in silos and they have a separate set of goals. So it's us versus them. Those two teams, whether it's separate parts of the organization working in a silo, or maybe it's one organization working cross-departmental, us versus them. It's bringing those two teams together. And this is where problem solving, you don't have to be the leader to bring the teams together. You could be an employee who's working in the transaction itself saying, I noticed this us versus them, right? Here's where problem solving, and here's a way to get promoted. What you want to do is bring those two teams together and do some team building exercise. You're immediately going to be seen as the leader, right? To diminish that us versus them. It doesn't always have to be the leader doing and recommending team building exercise. It could be somebody who's lower in the organization, who's very transactional. And it's like, you know what, in order for us to accomplish the company's overarching mission, we cannot have an us versus them. How about I, as the transaction person day to day, I'm going to bring everybody together and solve for that. How about that?
I think that's great. And I think that the point that anyone can be a leader at any time, at any point during any relationship or transaction is really important.
Yes, amen to that.
We have an anonymous question, which is, how do you handle it when you have lost respect for your higher ups?
Ooh, Okay, so I would say it goes back to one of those quotes on the slide. Humanize that person, humanize them, open up that two-way dialogue as much as possible, and try to figure out what's really going on. Was in a situation, really short story, was in a situation where everybody was losing respect for one of the higher ups. A person wasn't showing up to meetings, wasn't giving the deliverables, just wasn't performing. And there was a lot of talk about that particular individual across the organization. And I recommend, don't be a part of that. Don't be a part of saying things that aren't nice about higher ups. Just not good. But what we found out, the end of that story is what we found out is that person was having chemo and was undergoing cancer, and they were keeping it quiet. So don't judge a book by its cover. Really seek to understand and open up some two-way dialogue to figure out what's going on with that individual, right? Another perfect example would be if they're missing meetings, you can say something as simple as, hey, I missed you at the meeting. Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do for you? Right? So just make sure you open up the two-way dialogue and humanize that individual as much as possible.
I think that is such a good point. Everyone is human and everyone is going through all kinds of different things that we never really can see in the workplace. So that makes a lot of sense. So a little bit back to anyone can be a leader. What if someone is already solving problems for their employer, but they haven't really been recognized or promoted?
So that really gets down to clarity, clarity, clarity. You should have a employee development plan with your leader, and it should be a timeline. It should be specific, measurable, well articulated, realistic, and time bound. So my point is, you need to be clear. If you're looking for upward mobility, you should have a career development plan, and you and your leader need to agree that you're going to have different experiences that's going to get you from point A to point B.
Everyone should have a professional development plan. That's a wonderful thing. And if you don't have one that's already in place with your organization, it makes sense to create your own and have that discussion with your leader.
Absolutely.
So do you have this is from Carla, do you have any recommendations for addressing workers that display a low will and low skill attitude? Looks like situational leadership grid there.
That is Blanchard, right? That first quadrant of the situational leadership in Blanchard. If they have low skill and low will, that is a situation where HR and the leaders involved within the organization need to decide if people are in the right role before, and again, keeping people human, are they matched to the right role? Because I've seen people with low skill and low will, and it was because the organization forced the employee into a box that they should have never, or into a role that they should have never been in. So there needs to be some sort of an evaluation across the board of people with low skill, low will, to see if they're in the right role. And then if not, you know, sometimes there has to be tough decisions. And I would say from a leadership perspective, you have to help people make what I call a graceful exit, right? If they are not in the right role. And that's after figuring out if there's not any roles internal to the organization that they can be slotted into.
I think that's a great point. I know as leaders and executives and hiring managers, we put a lot of thought and work into hiring our employees. And so if they're not in a role that really makes sense for the team, is there other value that they can contribute in other ways? The next one is an interesting question around, and it's from an anonymous attendee. How do you problem solve around leadership barriers to moving DEI initiatives? So they've set goals on paper, but aren't ready to provide the approval to drive forward through the operationalized actions. So this question kind of sounds like, how do we motivate our leadership to take the idea and move it forward into something that's operationalized in the organization?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to the end step in the model, how you move the needle with senior executives. It's usually quantification that will help move the needle. So you want to quantify whatever problem it is you're trying to solve. Make sure they understand the organizational impact, right? If you can tie it to revenue, tie it to revenue. If you can tie it to transactions lost, customers lost, anything of that sort. And then in addition, make sure you tie it to impact. Now, this is the relationship side, because if your employees are having a time trying to solve for this problem, right, in the organization, you can more than likely tie it to low, what we call employee engagement scores as well. So look at both sides of the coin. Make sure that you touch the revenue and transaction side, those sort of metrics. Senior executives respond to that, but also make sure you bring the employee component by way of employee engagement scores as well.
That's a great answer. Not just this is the right thing to do, but this is the right thing for the business too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a question from Will Harris. What is the best way to maintain a healthy morale in the workplace?
Wow, there are so many different. Yes, right. There are so many different things you can do. I'm going to give just a couple really quick examples. If you are a leader, say hello. Say hello. When you are in the office and you're a leader, you should spend most of your time, if you're running transactional operations, you should spend most of your time walking the floor, engaging with employees. Say you should know everybody by name. You should know something special about everybody in your organization. That's a key way to make sure you're getting really good morale and engagement between leadership and frontline employees. Various team building activities. And how about this? Ask the employees, how do they want their morale addressed, right? So if you engage them in terms of what are their ideas, and here's key, implement their ideas, don't let it fall on deaf ears. Now you've put them in the driver's seat. I will share one really quick example where I worked for a company. It was Minneapolis based, and I think this person might be on the call, one of my former leaders, where he was able to achieve the highest in the history engagement scores at this particular organization. And the unique thing in terms of how he achieved it is he spent most of his time out on the floor walking and engaging in those phenomenal relationships.
In the military, we call that leadership by walking around.
Yes.
That's great. Two kind of more administrative questions. Will this recording of the webinar be made available for later viewing? And I see Heather shaking her head. So yes, that will be available. And then we have someone who went to the website but was unable to find where a consultation can be requested. Is there another way to request one?
another way to request, repeat
A
that?
consultation. I think.
Oh, a consultation. All they have to do, if they go to the website, there should be a contact me tab. On the website, there are multiple tabs along the top of the edithdorsey.com. Once you go there, contact me, and they can just send an email and I should get it. And then if not, if that's not working, my personal email address is very easy. It's my first and last name, Edith Dorsey, the number 7@gmail.com. Either way is fine.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think this could be our last question because I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts around this one. You mentioned mentorship. What criteria should we look for in terms of finding someone who is a good fit as a mentor?
Right. Somebody that you have respect for, right? And I really think that great mentors will not only be able to add value to the individual, but they should also be able to learn from, right? Because, for example, everybody on this call has wonderful experiences, right? And so a mentor should also be able to learn from the people that they're working with. So it has to be that symbiotic relationship, which is key. And then the other thing I would say is respect. If the person has traveled and had a journey that you are trying to pursue, like, for example, if you're interested in leadership, I bring close to 40 years in leadership, you probably want to align yourself with a leader who's been there, right? Who has traveled that journey and may be able to offer some insights.
Great. I know as a leader, I've had several different mentors for several different things. And sometimes you don't need just one mentor. You find that there are different folks throughout your career, and keeping in touch with them and keeping those relationships going is really important.
Yes, absolutely.
So Edith, I'd like to ask, do you have anything else you'd like to add? And then I'll turn it back to Nancy.
I just wanted to say, I am so impressed with this audience. You guys did a great job with the poll questions, and I'm sure they're all going to be dancing their way to happiness. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Nancy?
Thank you so much, Edith. Great information. And as we often find out, the Q&A portion and the discussion and dialogue, that really brings it home, and it really makes a difference and resonates with all of our participants. Meg, you did a great job on, vetting the questions. And, I'm just so pleased with the totality of all the information shared and learned, because I think that we can all apply it to our professional and in some cases our personal lives. And it doesn't matter where you are in your career and what level you're at, there's always opportunities to learn and refine and, address some of these areas. And problem solving is one that people think of it as just like an isolated skill. And it really is something that you have to continually refine and adapt to whatever the situation is and in your role. And I really think there's been some tremendous information that's been shared. I'm sure that you will have a lot of people reaching out. I would like to just say thank you to the National University alumni team with Patricia and Heather and Jen, and Tara helps us with this, but there's a lot of planning and prep. And we really do try to find great speakers on interesting topics. So, feel free to reach out if you have some suggestions, because we want, whether students or alumni or staff or faculty or community members, a time where you can focus on yourself. You can focus on how can you have an opportunity to improve your skills, to really, learn from others. And, you have a lot of knowledge you can share with others as well. I know that Patricia did put a comment about the National University Mentoring Network, and we are so appreciative of our alum who often volunteer as mentors. We have many students who are mentees, and sometimes it might be based on sector or the area of a degree program. Sometimes it might be someone who's transitioning from the military and they want to have a mentor who's also in that role. But I really think that that adds to the student experience, and it's a way for alum to give back, to the organization and serve as an ambassador, because You all have had different experiences, and experience can really help other people grow. But thank you so much for joining us for the NU Speaker Series. We will have an announcement out very soon on our next speaker series. They are always held at least once per month. So look forward to future communication, and thanks to Dr. Edith Dorsey, wonderful, successful graduate from NCU. We're very proud of the knowledge that you've been able to share with us, and thanks to all for participating.